Solamara wasn't just a town, it was a trap. A place where the sun shone too bright, shadows lingered too long, and secrets clung to the air like poison. And at its heart stood the boarding house, waiting to claim its next victim. A sunny place for shady people. It was a small town nestled on the edge of an arid desert. The sun blazed relentlessly, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and curl like claws. The townsfolk called it Solamara, but drifters passing through had another name for Ite's sunny place for shady people. Every building in Solamara seemed to lean into the sun, their warped wooden frames creaking like tired skeletons. The air carried a strange, acrid scent, a mix of sun-baked earth and something faintly metallic, like blood left to rust. Travelers often remarked that the town felt alive, its heat pulsing like a heartbeat, its shadows moving even when no one walked past. No one came to Solamara unless they had something to hide. The people who stayed, the shady ones, rarely spoke of their pasts, but their eyes told stories of sins too dark for words. And yet, even among the secretive souls of Solamara, there was one place no one dared to go. The old boarding house at the town's edge. The boarding house had stood there for decades. Its once bright yellow paint now faded to a sickly mustard hue. It seemed to absorb the heat, radiating an unnatural warmth even at night. Rumor had it that the house had been built by a man named Elias Crane, a prospector who struck gold but lost his mind. Some said he killed his entire family before disappearing into the desert. Others claimed he'd built the house to trap the souls of those who crossed him, feeding on their torment for eternity. Regardless of the truth, the house had a reputation. People who entered rarely came back out, and those who did spoke of horrors too great to articulate. Whispers of screams heard in the dead of night, and shadows moving in the windows when the house was supposedly empty kept most at bay. But for Jack Harper, a drifter with nothing to lose, the house was an opportunity. The drifter's gamble Jack arrived in Solamara with a worn-out backpack, a revolver with 2 bullets, and a desperate need for a place to lay low. He'd crossed the wrong people in the last town, or maybe it was the town before that. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Solamara offered anonymity, and the boarding house offered free lodging. A scruffy old man outside the saloon had warned him to stay away, but Jack laughed it off. "Ghost stories don't scare me," he said, tapping his revolver. "I've got bigger problems." The old man's eyes narrowed. "The house don't care about your problems, son. When you step inside, you'll wish they were the only thing chasing you." Jack ignored him and made his way to the house. The door creaked open before he could even knock, as if the house had been expecting him. Inside, the air was thick and stale, carrying a faint odor of decay. The floorboards groaned under his boots, and the walls seemed to close in around him. But Jack was too tired and too stubborn to care. He picked a room on the second floor, dropped his bag, and collapsed onto the bed. It wasn't until he woke up hours later that he realized his mistake. Nightfall, the first thing Jack noticed was the silence. Solamara was never truly quiet. The desert wind always whispered through the town, and the cicadas droned on like clockwork. But now, there was nothing. The second thing he noticed was the darkness. The room was pitch black, far darker than it should have been, with the moon shining bright outside. He reached for his revolver and froze when he felt a hand. It wasn't his own. The hand was cold and bony, its grip firm yet unnatural. Jack jerked away and scrambled to light a match. The flickering flame revealed an empty room, but the imprint of fingers lingered on his wrist like a phantom brand. Breathing heavily, Jack backed toward the door, only to find it wouldn't budge. The air grew heavier, pressing against his chest like an invisible weight. And then he heard Itae's low, guttural whisper. "Why did you come?" The voice was everywhere and nowhere, echoing through his skull. Jack spun around, holding the match out like it was a weapon. The flames sputtered and died, plunging him back into darkness. But his eyes were adjusting now, and he saw them shapes moving in the shadows. Faces half-formed and twisted, their hollow eyes glowing faintly. They surrounded him, mouths opening and closing in silent screams. The house's truth, Jack fired his revolver, the muzzle flash illuminating the room for a split second. The shadows recoiled but didn't disappear. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding as the whispers grew louder, overlapping into an incomprehensible cacophony. Suddenly, the floor gave way, and Jack fell into darkness. When he hit the ground, he found himself in a vast, dimly lit chamber. The walls pulsed like they were alive, veins of black ichor coursing through them. In the center of the room stood Elias Crane, or what was left of him. His form was grotesque, his body twisted and fused with the house itself. His eyes burned like embers as he spoke. "Welcome to my sanctuary," Crane said, his voice a chilling blend of human and inhuman tones. "You came seeking refuge, but all who enter here become part of the house. Your sins feed me, your fears sustain me." Jack tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. Crane raised a hand, and tendrils of shadow shot out, wrapping around Jack's limbs. He screamed as they pulled him toward the walls, his skin burning where they touched. As his vision blurred, he saw faces in the walls, the souls of those who had come before him, their mouths open in eternal torment. The eternal cycle when the sun rose the next morning, the boarding house stood silent and still, as it always did. The townsfolk went about their day, careful not to glance at the house for too long. But those who passed close enough swore they heard something, a faint, desperate whisper coming from within. Help me, and so Solamara remained a sunny place for shady people, its dark heart hidden in plain sight. The house waited patiently, its hunger never sated, ready for the next lost soul to wander through its doors.